Students, welcome. The goal of this video is to teach you how to do an analysis of your own writing for the purposes of the writing self-analysis assignment. So what I recommend is that you get a piece of your writing, and I'm recommending you use your letter to the editor document, which is the longest piece of writing you've written, and that you will go through these steps to analyze it both linguistically and rhetorically, and you'll also do an analysis of the sources. In essence, this tries to address the three major outcomes of our course, which is written communication, critical thinking, and information literacy. So by conducting this analysis, you'll have feedback on how well you're meeting those outcomes, and will help you also to set goals for how you can improve in those outcomes in future courses. So the first thing you'll want to do is get a copy of these notes. This is on Canvas, the Writing Analysis Notes template, and you can use this. Here's a blank version. Okay, and you will use this, you'll make a copy, and then you can add your own information as you conduct your analysis. The first part of the report asks you to do a linguistic analysis. And so here you'll look at your use of academic English language, and you'll compare it with other measures that are typical of academic English writing and see how your writing compares. Are you close to that typical target, or are you different than that target? It's not necessarily bad if you're different from the target, but it may give you some information about how your writing compares with what we typically expect of academic writing. So for the first part of this, we need to go to a website called analyzemywriting.com. Okay, and on this website, there is room for you to enter your text that you want to analyze. So I here have the draft of my letter to the editor, and I'm going to copy it from the introduction to the conclusion. I'm not going to include my reference page or anything like that. And then I go back to the website and I will paste it in the empty box. Now, the first set of statistics we want are these basic text statistics. So once you've got that selected, you can click the Analyze Text button. Okay, most of this data we're not particularly interested in. What we really want to know is the information that's presented in these two bar charts at the bottom. So if we go back and we look at average word length is the first statistic we want to get. So a typical measure of academic writing suggests that there's about 5 letters per average word in academic writing. And so I'll look at my data results here. Okay, I have 5.03 average letters per word. And so I'll record that on my document. Okay, 5.03. Okay. Now the next one we want is the average sentence length. And you will provide, typically in academic writing, most writers include between 20 to 25 words per sentence. If it's much higher than that on average, it suggests that your sentences might be very long, very complex, and it could be difficult to read. If it's much lower than 20, it suggests that your writing is maybe more simplistic, more approachable, but maybe not within that target of what we expect for academic writing. So again, go back to the website and look at what that average is, okay? And here, this sample suggests that it's 20.99. Okay, and so that's a little different than what I analyzed this morning, but I made some, it's because it has a couple of errors. That's why I'm not going to change it. The first time I analyzed it, before I hit the analyze button, I fixed some of the errors, like these two words being put together and not separating those. So it's always good to just sort of review your writing before you hit that analyze button. Because then when you analyze it, you'll get slightly different information. There we go. Now that matches what I recorded early, 21.03. So 21.03 is within that expected range. So to me, that my piece of writing fits within what we would expect of academic writing sentence length. Okay. Now, if we look at it more in detail, I can see I have some especially long sentences. That could be problematic. We don't want too many really long sentences, but sometimes there's a good reason, right? A sentence has a series of lists, and that's the best way to represent it. But in general, we want to have sentences that fit close. And it's good to have some range, right? Not all of your sentences being the exact same size, but some smaller ones and some bigger ones. That's a good thing too. That variety makes it easier and more pleasurable for readers. Okay, our next statistic that we want to look at is the average lexical density. Now, a typical measure is between 50 and 60%. Lexical density refers to the rate at which your sentences contain concrete words or content words. These are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs compared with all the words in the sentence. And that includes things like prepositions and articles and determiners and other words that have primarily a grammatical meaning. So what we're looking for is what is the intent of actually concrete informational words versus more just grammatical words. And the higher that number is, the more information packed your writing is. Now, academic writing is generally between 50 to 60% of content words, this lexical density measure. If it's lower than that, 40, that's more common of casual social writing, especially oral language is like that. If it's higher than 60, that's a very information dense piece of writing. And that's what academic and informational texts are like, but it can be very difficult to read that type of writing because there's so much information in it. So 50 to 60% is the recommended number. Okay, now to find that, go back up to the top here and click on the lexical density tab and analyze your text again. Okay, now the graph shows you your lexical density for every single sentence, and you'll see some sentences are lower, okay, but other ones are higher. But on average, the lexical density for this piece of writing is 56.05. Okay. And so 56.05, I'll record that, and that's within the range. And so it's pretty typical of academic writing. Our last measure using this website will be the readability score. Now, readability score is a formula that is a composite of many of the other things we've looked at: sentence length, word length, lexical density. It often looks at things like vocabulary frequency as well. And there are many different measures for readability scores. This website runs your text through a variety of those scores and gives you kind of an average readability score. Readability scores are designed to correlate in general with grade levels in the US school system. So a readability score of 6 would suggest that your writing is appropriate for a 6th grade student. Because our target audience is first-year university students at SUMAC, we're probably hoping for a readability score close to 13. Okay, my average score here is 12.71. So that's pretty close to the target. Okay. Now, some of the readability scores were slightly higher, some were slightly lower, but on average, it's pretty close. So I'll go ahead and record that, which, 12.78. And so that's pretty close to the target. That's good. If it were really high, that suggests that my writing might be too difficult for the target audience. If I had a score of 16 or higher, that suggests I'm targeting university graduates rather than university students. If my score is much lower, like 9 or 10, that means I'm targeting high school students rather than university students. Okay, so that's just a measure that you can also compare. Now, to do the next part of the lexical analysis, I recommend using this website called LexTutor. It has a tool called Vocab Profiler. It looks pretty ugly, okay? But here's what you do. You just delete what's currently in the text box, and you'll paste in, once again, your writing. So I'm going to copy it again, come back, paste it into the box, make sure I delete whatever's in there. And again, if you've got any errors, this is a good time to look at them and fix them. You'll get a more accurate measure of your writing if you fix any spelling errors that you notice, or in this case, it's not putting spaces. Okay, and then go ahead and submit. Now, the first thing we want to look at here is how many thousands of words. So K1 means the first 1,000 most common words in English. Now, this is going to have words like and the, and boy, girl, man, woman, sit, talk, very common words in English. K2 represents the next 1,000 most words in English. So the second most 1,000 words in English. Same with K3 and K4. So for my piece of writing, if someone is familiar with the first 4,000 most common words in English, then they will understand 95% of my text. That's what coverage 95 means. Okay. Now, in order to get coverage 98%, they need to know an additional the next 5,000 groups of words. So I'd have to get up to the 9,000 most common. And to get to 100%, that's because there are some words that are not part of this list. In this case, many of them are misspellings or proper names that the website didn't properly flag. But if we look here, what our target is, we want to make sure that we are around 95% coverage, close to around K4, maybe K5. Okay. If you're under K4, that means your vocabulary use is very basic and simple, which means it's very readable, but maybe not very academic. If it takes above K6 to reach that 95%, that means your writing is very academic, very specialized or technical, and it may actually be difficult for your readers to read it. So the target there is kind of K4, K5, maybe K6. And so mine was K4, and so I'll write down K4 there. Right. Now the next thing that we can look at here is to go further down and look specifically at what kinds of words did I use beyond the K6 level. And these are more specialized words that may not be very commonly used in English, and as a result, it may be difficult for our readers to understand our text if we use a lot of low-frequency words that are very specialized. So what this shows here is the words that you used at different levels and the number of times you use them. So I used the word audience 5 times, but audience is still a fairly common word. It's within the first 3,000 most common words in English. Now, by the time I get to K6, okay, these are now more less common words, okay? Even K4, K5, those are still academic, general academic words. Like we see a word like campus and distract. These are words that we would agree are pretty common academic words. When we get up to K6, we have more specialized words. So I have the word here contentious that I used twice. I used the word alumni twice, the word envision. Now here it's saying I used the word twain 24 times. The program shouldn't have flagged the word twain. It should have taken it out of the count because it's a proper noun. So I'm just going to ignore that. I used the word mindset a couple times. And then here again, we've got a problem. The word sumac, I'm not using sumac as a tree. This was the name of our school, a nickname. I used it 16 times, but it's a proper noun. So I'm just going to ignore that result because it's not really a word. It's a name. And then there were some off-list words. These are actually all related to names or that Latin expression. So those ones I can also ignore. Okay. So really what I'm seeing here is that the word contentious, alumni, envision, and mindset. I need to think, would my audience know these words? I could even go and look in my text how I use these words. Did I explain them well for my audience? Or are there some words that I use that are maybe difficult, but I didn't explain them, and so maybe my audience will have difficulties. Now, if you're really interested, you can scroll down further, and it will show you every single word, not just words that are used multiple times. So for example, here's some words that are above the 6K level, but I only use them once, like mentor, reap, solicited, outspoken, masquerade, attire, broaching, comportment, demeanor, dehumanization. Okay, but so some of these words are a little more high level, a little more difficult to read and understand, but I didn't use them very much. And so I'm pretty confident that for the most part, I'm okay. But I did record down those 4 words that I think are above at the 6,000th level or above that I think it would be useful to note, okay? But there's not very many of them. Right, and so that's how we conduct our linguistic analysis. Using those 2 websites, at any point, you're welcome to go back, review the steps of the video, but your goal is to review your letter to the editor, okay, and record this data so that you'll have this data when you go to report on your writing and what you learned from the linguistic analysis. If you have any questions about this process, please let me know.